Good day, everyone. You are listening to All Jujitsu podcast. In this series, we're looking to explore the business side of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is brought to you by alljujitsu.com, the world's first complete business platform for BJJ professionals. And here we're talking about athletes, coaches, BJJ brands, freelancers such as BJJ photographers, event organizers, and so on. All Jiu-Jitsu provides you with access to an online marketplace where you can sell your services such as seminars and private classes, manage your calendar, communicate with your clients, or sell physical goods all in one place. If you want to make a step towards being truly professional, join us on alljujitsu.com. Our guest today is Sam Mc Nally. He is one of the best BJJ Black Belts in Ireland and the owner of a corporate wellness provider, Exact BJJ, which offers BJJ training services to multiple tech companies around Dublin. In this episode, we're discussing all aspects of Exact BJJ, how it operates and sells its services, development over the last few years, and even some adventures ordering mats from China. We also discuss innovation and the future of BJJ industry, from online products to sponsorship deals. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you do, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Sam Mc Nally, thanks very much for joining.
Hello, Peter.
Under normal circumstances, we could probably meet in person, grab a coffee somewhere in Dublin, in one of the many shops, fine coffee shops in Dublin. But we're in isolation, all of us. So how are you keeping?
I'm good. I'm still alive, so that's good. Still at it. How about you?
Not too bad as well. So just keeping myself busy with these podcasts. So I think there'll be a lot more of these recorded over the next week or two than all the upcoming months after that.
Sure, it's a good time to get it done.
Yeah, for sure. So you are a black belt here in Dublin, in East Coast Jiu-Jitsu Academy, but you are also a CEO, let's say, of Exact BJJ, right? So this is the reason we have you on the podcast. So I think it's a quite interesting business model, which is getting more and more popular around the world. But it seems like in Dublin, Dublin is made for it because of the presence of so many kind of tech companies, the progressive companies, etc. So talk to us a little about Exact BJJ, what it is, what it represents, and what do you do?
Yeah, well, so what I do is I go into the different tech companies and sort them out with the equipment and everything they need to train, and then provide them with jiu-jitsu classes. So for the basic idea is that now in these companies, they all want to provide good amenities for attracting staff. So in Dublin, there's obviously a limited number of people, and there's a huge amount of companies. There's close to probably 1,000 software-based tech companies within Ireland now. So there's a huge demand for staff and how these different companies can compete with each other. And a lot of the ways that they compete is through what they can provide in terms of obviously services and amenities. So some of these companies have crazy things like huge kitchens and canteens with all this gourmet food. And I think it's getting very popular now is have gyms and corporate wellness. So like 4 or 5 years ago, I started doing this in companies, and since then I've just slowly started to grow it. And basically what we do is we have mats. There's myself and other people as well to teach the classes. I have a curriculum that's designed for people to go from complete day one beginner with no experience all the way up to being able to get as far as competing and progressing. And then, pretty much that's how it is. It's pretty straightforward, but I enjoy doing it. So, yeah.
And did you find the niche yourself, or did they come to you? So who came to who? Like whether it was the demand there first, looking for somebody to do this, or were you proactive in approaching these companies?
Well, initially what happened was somebody that I trained with was approached by another guy who was working in a company to teach jiu-jitsu classes, but he'd actually just opened up an academy, so he didn't really have the time to do it for the evening slots. So he asked me to do it. I started doing it. It started going really well, but at the time I was in college, so I was only just doing this like 2 nights a week or whatever. And then I went away for the summer to America to go train. I came back, and then my college work started to dissipate, and eventually I just dropped out, and I started doing this full time. So initially, I just found like a gym in town, or like a commercial gym in town, where I started running some classes to try and network with people and meet people in different companies, because we would have been in the Grand Canal Dock area. Started meeting different people. They got me into their companies, and then I just kind of grew it ever since. It's still a very small operation, but it's sustainable, and it also provides me with the ability to be able to teach classes, train, and now I'm beginning to scale it up and get other people involved as well. So
nice. And how many companies do you have under your wing now?
At the moment, I'm just doing 5. So yeah, I pretty much have 1 or 2 classes a day. So yeah.
Are you aware of much competition in this regard, or is it just yourself in Dublin, or any other people providing similar type of service?
I think there's 1 or 2 other guys who are giving it a go. As far as like an actual people pursuing like commercial enterprise, there's not a huge amount of competition. It's a difficult enough market to get into at the moment. So I'm trying to be the first mover there. But yeah, there's other people that are working in some companies that I think have been doing some courses and stuff, but nothing major that I'm aware of at the moment.
Yeah, makes sense. And so you said you predominantly work with the tech companies. Is that a kind of deliberate choice? Would you take any other company, or is it just because you're kind of just narrowing it down because you know that these type of companies are definitely up for something like this?
Yeah, well, I find that most of the companies that want to bring in these amenities are generally fairly innovative tech type companies, because it's such a new thing, especially Jiu-Jitsu. Like up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, a lot of people wouldn't have heard of Jiu-Jitsu. So most of the companies I find are tech companies. Also, there's like limits in terms of which companies are going to actually have, gyms and corporate wellness programs, where usually they have 1,000+ employees and they're multinationals. But I have worked in Irish companies before as well. But I find that the tech companies are usually the hotspot for these types of activities.
In terms of the audience that you get within these companies, so who are your students? What type of, can you kind of create an avatar for them? Who is your typical student in these companies?
Yeah, typical student probably be in the age range of early to mid 30s. Depends on the company now, but generally they either work in sales or they're software developers. So a lot of people that I find that stick it out are usually kind of more managerial types that want something to do as a break from their office life. So just for context, usually I'm working in these companies either early in the morning or at lunchtime. So especially people I find that work in sales, they're usually kind of managerial types who want to have a little bit of a break from their office life. They're trying to keep fit, but they're busy people, so it's hard for them to travel. They might have families that they have to attend to in the evening and whatnot. And then the other side is usually software developers, who are just kind of like, people that maybe wouldn't necessarily be engaged in a huge amount of sports otherwise, but they know what Jiu-Jitsu is, and then when they get into it and the kind of cognitive aspect, it really takes a grip on them. So that's generally the clientele that I meet.
Do you foresee any changes within that, or it's probably going to be like this for a while?
I reckon that the market will begin to expand, and I'll see more people involved from different organizations. Like right now, since it's the case that it's mostly the tech companies that are pushing this forward. I worked in a bank before for a while. That was an interesting experience. They're an interesting type of people. But I presume now that more and more companies will begin to adopt the regimes of corporate wellness, and you'll see more expanded audience. But I find that generally, even of the different people that I meet, they're usually along similar lines anyways. They would have heard about Jiu-Jitsu through like a Joe Rogan podcast. They might have watched a bit of MMA.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in terms of, again, just going back to you kind of penetrating these companies with your service offering, so you run, obviously you have a website as part of your thing. Do any companies reach out to you through the website, or does anybody find you, or do you still have to predominantly find them?
Yeah, most of the time it's other people approaching me. So at the moment, I'm not necessarily trying to go out and get a lot of companies. I'm more so trying to put the framework for commercial enterprise around the business. So most of the time now, it'll be people coming to find me, and usually it's somebody who works in an office, or somebody who works in the HR department or the office management, or if they have a dedicated corporate wellness and events team, they usually contact me, and then I'll set this up. And I find that people, obviously as one person might work in one office, eventually they'll change jobs, move to another office, and then that kind of networking effect of, to just the brand of through osmosis through the companies kind of keeps the business coming in. So yeah, but of course I still try to not necessarily limit to some degree the amount of companies to work in to keep the advantage of the service competitive. So
let's talk a little bit then about the kind of whole logistics part of your operation, or let's say operations management. What goes into your service? What makes you being capable of providing this service? So what do you need? So it's yourself, you coach in the classes, obviously. You need to develop a curriculum. Do you supply the mats to these companies as well?
Yeah, so if I was to take you through what the process would look like if you were somebody who worked in a business, generally, obviously, there'd be an exchange of emails with, usually I try to essentially develop a relationship with these people for the sale, and then obviously give out the quotation and any other documentation related to legalities and risk assessments, insurance, things like that need to be done, get the contract, and then from there we do everything in terms of providing mats, curriculum, instructor, and it's as simple as that really. Say the class on a Monday morning, the mats are going to arrive before then, instructor arrives early, lays everything out, it's going to be good to go. Each class is an hour long. It's a 15-minute warm-up, usually consisting of something like yoga. We get in some technique and then some positional training, and that's that.
Awesome. Take me through a little bit the documentation that you mentioned on all the kind of the legalities and the risk assessment and stuff. So how do you take care of this? Is it do you do it yourself through just research? Do you use any templates? Do you use any companies that can assist with that? So how do you take this on?
Yeah, for most of the more technical things, I try to outsource that because I'm not very knowledgeable on that element of things. So obviously, the insurance is a big aspect. So I have a good insurance provider that covers me for working within different companies with a certain class size. On top of that as well is having a risk assessment. Usually companies are going to request a risk assessment, having a service agreement that we come to be able to facilitate the provision of the service, and also any other terms that go along with that. So there's certain terms that I operate under in terms of things like exclusivity and whatnot. The obviously invoicing and things like that is normal. I can do all that in-house, and then the accounting and stuff is obviously outsourced. So it's relatively straightforward. Anything that's legal or revenue or tax related or anything like that, I just outsource that to other actual professionals.
Do you find that you have to deal mostly with the actual companies themselves, or are there management companies that provide the facilities to these kind of tech companies? So who is usually the person you're actually contracting?
Generally, it's directly to the company. So most companies have in-house management for these types of things, especially as they begin to grow. Usually there's an events team or dedicated corporate wellness. Some companies have office management. And then, I generally just try to go direct to those companies because they're the ones who are going to actually sign the contract at the end of the day. So yeah, it's always business to business.
And how has your sales technique evolved over the last couple of years? Do you think you got better at it and just more direct? Because I imagine, it's a little bit intimidating when you're just starting out and you have to reach out to these kind of monsters of companies. And
yeah, I'm absolutely terrible at it, to be honest. I don't like. That's probably the least enjoyable thing for me is trying to sell. Even like on the phone, having a phone call, trying to negotiate, trying to sell is just like, it makes my skin crawl, kind of. But mostly I find that the people in the companies are, like, generally the person you can deal with is just a normal person who obviously has a corporate persona to be able to be professional. But usually I find that meeting people in person is the best way to establish good rapport with them. So usually if I contact somebody in a company, I'll try and meet them and just chat to them so that they can know what I'm about and also see what my actual vibe is, and then, in terms of actually establishing a sale, I'm honestly shockingly bad at it. You see, the thing is, a lot of people that I teach work in sales, so I can get some guidance on what to do, and it's usually just like, I didn't think of that, or like, how do I not know these things already? And then things that seem like mammoth tasks for me at the start, when I look back now, I'm like, that was absolutely nothing. Why was I even worried about that? But it is kind of intimidating because these are big organizations and these people get reached out to all the time, probably trying to sell. I find that having a degree of brand recognition and also other people within business to provide testimony, got my headphones, it makes a big difference. I feel that that's the real distinguishing factor in terms of trying to actually make a sale, is to have a personal relationship with the management, like whoever it is who's in charge, as well as having recommendations from other people within the business to bring this service forward. So yeah, I'm still terrible at it. I'm forever learning, but I don't feel like it's within my temperament to be hard salesman.
Yeah, it all makes sense what you're saying, because with personal relationships there comes a degree of trust, and I think I always found in my previous job, I was always big on trust. If there's no trust, doesn't matter how good your service is, whatever you do, if people don't trust you, nothing's going to work. You could be the best there is in whatever you're doing, but if people don't feel like they can trust you,
and like you how you relate to other people, you express so much more than you realize when you're speaking to these people, I find. So being able to get in front of someone and actually have them see what you're about makes such a big difference. Like even you were saying to me before, when you were trying to negotiate something, and when you rang the guy, you're like, this is a martial arts gym, and then when they met you and they saw you're actually like professional looking person who had a real business that they were trying to bring forth, and not just some knuckle dragging, who knows. That makes a big difference, I find, and it's a good thing to learn for trying to establish these relationships.
Yeah, so just for people listening, Sam refers to a conversation we had, I think, a while back when I was relocating my academy in Dublin. We were essentially kicked out of the old place, which wasn't a great place anyway, but we were forced out of it by the landlord, and we had to find a new location, and found a decent place where we are now, a much better place, kind of a retail unit. And I had to meet with the owners, and after we had the meeting with them and they agreed to lease out the unit to us, they confessed to me that on the way to the meeting they were fully prepared just to tell me basically to leave and never come back, because their impression of a martial arts academy was something else. And when they saw that I could actually was well presented and could conduct myself and construct sentences, they was like, oh, okay, so you so it's kind of unfortunate, but at the same time it's a good learning point. So the impressions make a difference, the trust makes a difference, and so all can relate to this. It was a very funny moment. Also, I think we spoke to you once a little bit about the mats and kind of the physical goods that you need for it. And you've been ordering. A lot of people are struggling with getting quality surfaces for whether it's academies or whatever other establishments that they need to arrange for jiu-jitsu. How were your adventures with ordering mats from China, I believe?
Yeah, if anyone is listening to this is planning on ordering mats from China, I would highly recommend against this. Yeah, I had an interesting experience trying to provide mats. So, like, when I first started out, I used to use those 2x1 like judo mats, and they were a nightmare to transport between place to place, because obviously you'd have to carry each one individually, and you never know how far you might have to carry a mat into a building, you know. So yeah, it was a real nightmare when I first started to be moving these mats around. So I eventually decided that I'd find some rollout mats to use instead of having to carry these ones out, because the rollout mats are these big bundles and they're really easy to move and they're really quick to roll out. Yeah, and then I ordered these mats from China. This guy, I posted on Facebook looking for mats, and then some sales rep from some Chinese company contacted me being like, here, look, we make these mats. It's way cheaper than buying them in Europe or whatever. It was half the price. And I was like, and he sent me a video of some guy in Australia who bought mats off him, who'd laid out his full gym with them, and they looked really good. So I contacted this guy from Australia, and I was like, how are your mats? Like, this guy contacted me, he said that you bought them off him before, what's it like? And he was like, yeah. And he was legit just gym owner in Australia. He's like, yeah, they're good, they work, the guy I dealt with was really good. I was like, okay, cool. So I go and I buy these mats, and like, just in my absolute naivety, this was like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. And I was only just kind of getting a bit of momentum. So obviously I need like a few different sets of mats to be able to transport in between the different companies. So I was ordering a good amount of them, and they were cheap. They were like half the price of what they would have been if I bought them in Europe. And I was like, great. So this guy contacts me on Facebook, and I'm like, I look into the company, and the company's real. I contact the guy who's bought it before. It's all real. I'm like, this looks good to me. It's all above board. So anyways, I send him the money, and he quotes me, obviously, he quotes me price, quotes me shipping, all that. I send the money, and I'm like, cool, I'll wait for these mats to arrive. Like 2 or 3 days later, oh, by the way, it's Chinese New Year now, your mat's gonna be delayed by like a month or something. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever, you know. Oh yeah, I got a loan out to get them as well. If anybody's listening trying to start a business, don't use debt. It's the worst idea possible, because I go and I get a loan out for these mats. So I've basically, maxed out my resources in terms of credit. And then they eventually, weeks and weeks later, arrive in Dublin, and I get a call from the handling agent in Dublin saying, yeah, your mats are here. The shipping fee has been passed on all the way from China, so you're going to have to pay this before the mats get released. And the shipping fee plus tax was 100% the value of the mats that I'd already gotten a loan to pay for. And if you don't claim within 30 days, they get destroyed. So there I was with basically no money. The resources I needed to be able to actually operate my business were in some warehouse somewhere where I had to pay to get them released. And it was an absolute nightmare. So then, anyways, after contacting a bunch of people, try to figure it all out. In the process, I realized as well that if you do want to buy things from China, you have to hire a shipping agent in Ireland to negotiate the shipping costs for you before you make the order, which I didn't know about. Anyways, eventually I absolutely scrambled to get the money together, selling all sorts of long-term memberships for like 3 months, 6 month memberships for people that were paying me for individual classes and teach like private lessons, all sorts. Scrambled the money together, lost. I used to have a full head of hair before that happened, and then now I've lost like a goat. But yeah, that was a good learning experience. The main thing to take away from that is, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
It's very much like jiu-jitsu, right? You get tapped, you learn, and you apply the learning somewhere else. So you probably won't make this mistake again, and hopefully people listening to this also, because a lot of people, I get a lot of messages, like a couple of messages a month, usually people asking about, the advice on the mats, because like a lot of people are starting like different things with jiu-jitsu, just getting advice. And you'd have to be very cautious ordering anything, not even from China, just from China, but from anywhere outside of Europe, if you're in Europe, because they're all different, again, tax regulations and the shipping costs and the VAT. You hear a lot of even something as basic as ordering a gi from the States. Like it arrives as like you have to pay another like shipping costs plus the VAT on that, and people like end up paying like $300-400 for a basic gi that they ordered from the States. So yeah, guys, watch out for that. How many like other people do you have working with you who teach classes?
I just have one other person that's actually employed, and then I have some contractors that would work when I'm out of the country. So obviously I'm still traveling to go compete. So in terms of actual outsourced classes, I only have one person doing that, and then I'd have some other people that I contact pretty frequently to be able to cover some of the classes while I'm away.
That feeds into the next topic then, which is your competitive career. So you're still young, very competitive, fairly successful. What is it? How long have you been a black belt now? About a year?
Nah, like 6 or 7 months maybe.
So you've had quite a good bit of success in the competition scene. Well, always at all belt levels, but now it kind of gets really serious right at the black belt level. So, you travel a lot, you compete a lot when there's no pandemics around.
I was meant to be flying home from California today, but unfortunately I had to cancel that.
So how do you approach the whole situation where you are still very competitive, you still need to train a lot, and you also running a business that potentially requires a good bit of your time?
Yeah, well, I always try to put the competitions first. Like when I initially started doing this, it was to be able to pay for me to be able to train and compete. So that's still my goal always. I find that I've definitely learned a lot in terms of how to actually manage the workload of what's going on, because there's not a huge amount to do, but if you don't do it, it does pile up and it'll get quite tricky, especially like admin-based work and just, things you need to do, like declaring your income and invoicing, quotes, emailing people, responding to people, all the logistics as well. All that kind of stuff is usually quite small tasks, so it does pile up. So usually I just have like a to-do list, and I just give myself, a bunch of different slots throughout the day where it's like, I know this time free, I'll get this much done. And then just try to do that consistently, because that kind of consistent pieces of small work is much more manageable for me when I'm training than having to, wait, like just put it off for a few days and sit down and go through a big load of things to do. In terms of actually managing it with training and competing, I'm always trying to put the travel and the competitions and training first. Now, it's probably not the most, business savvy move, but the reason I'm doing this is so that I can compete. So, I find that I will travel and compete as much as I need to. I can outsource all of my work when I do choose to do that. Sometimes I take small breaks to go off to train in other places if I can. Like in January, I went over to Norway for a week to train with Tommy and Espen. That was the serious experience. I want to go back there basically as soon as possible. And then on top of that as well, and thankfully I have lots of people around that are very dependent for helping me out when I need, especially for having classes covered, and also just the general business tasks. Like, it's such a thing that you might not think about a lot if you don't have it, but like people that are service providers that get back to you very fast makes life so much easier. Like, especially for example, like doing taxes and whatnot, like being able to have someone that'll email you back like within an hour when you contact them makes everything so much easier to run. And especially if there's somebody teaching or covering a class, having them being able to just always turn up on time and do a good job, and always the people that are in the class, giving good feedback and saying that was great is, I think that's a lot of it to be able to, balance.
Yeah, so you basically have your priorities straight in terms of like you still prioritize your competition. Which makes sense. Again, while you're saying it's not savvy from a kind of business perspective, you could argue that, but what is the purpose of the business, right? So if it is to fund your competitive career, at least for the next few years, then that's what you have to do. But then I have a question in relation to your obligations, I guess, to the companies that you supply with the service. Do they expect you to be there every time, or are they clear on the idea that there might be other people kind of replacing you, or do they care at all as long as kind of the service is provided?
Well, obviously everything is signed and negotiated on behalf of my company, so it's always that the terms of which are that the company will always provide an instructor, whether it be me or someone else. So most of the time they don't mind, having other staff in, and obviously there's logistical and security operations that have to be managed at the same time as well. So, it's not like I'm just in and out every so often. It's always the case that generally, for whatever company it is, I have the same person who'll be in there if it's not me. And they don't mind as long as there's a class there. That's the main thing. And what people really want is to have somebody who goes in and brightens up their day. It doesn't necessarily have to be the person who's doing it is competent.
Yeah, and then it's up to you, I guess, to select the right people. What about so from what I see in this type of business, a lot of the guys who are doing something like this are operating as individuals. They just say, oh, well, you contract me. So where do you think you have a competitive advantage, or what are the advantages of having the company over you as an individual going and teaching there? Can you even access those type of services and markets without having formed a company?
Yeah, I think most of the time when I deal with people obviously I deal with these companies and I'm dealing with individual people in the companies, they expect that the premise that you're going to be operating under is the same premise as them in terms of, basic practices. So, for example, receiving a quote on behalf of a company so that they can raise a purchase order so that I can then invoice. It's just a standard practice amongst companies that they expect to operate that's operated on behalf of those operations are done on behalf of a company usually. So I always try to put that forward, and I feel that that's integral. And then obviously in terms of the actual logistics of being able to scale, you wouldn't want to be a sole trader with an employee and then getting sued, and then being able to come after your, and not that that's ever happened to me, I've ever been close to it, but just as these are possibilities. So being able to forming an LLC and also for your tax regulations, I think having a company is a much greater advantage. Obviously there are people who do provide this on a individual personal basis, but I feel like in terms of scalability, having an actual brand that can be marketed as a company, and then all of the advantages that come with that, both legally and financially, are key.
Let's touch on the actual Jujitsu aspect of your teaching and the team building, because so you're teaching in a number of locations. I know a lot of the guys are proudly representing you in the competitions, Exact BJJ, they're wearing the rash guards and everything, but you have quite limited exposure to them, so it's very much different to running of an academy. So you're still their coach, they still kind of view you as such, they still feel the belonging, but it's to a less extent, I guess, than being part of a traditional jiu-jitsu team. So how do you manage that? How do you perceive that? Or do you just take it as it is? Say, this is as much as I can give?
Yeah, this is kind of a big disadvantage of doing it like this in terms of coaching and students. A lot of what I enjoy about the actual combination of having jiu-jitsu in a business is being able to meet people and establish a relationship with them and then coach them and watch them develop, whereas with the limited exposure of being in a company versus having an actual academy that they can come to it's a major disadvantage, to be honest. And it does feel a bit disenchanting to me now going forward, because it's like, well, these people, I don't get to see them a lot. But when I usually do get somebody new into the class, I'll try to get them to join an academy if possible. Like, I've sent a lot of people to you, for example, so that they can get good, consistent training in. And then, funnily enough, in some of the companies, they'll start training themselves, just having kind of open mats, especially if there's like a purple belt that's already training there and they can get insured and they can get permission from the business. Sometimes they'll also train open mats. And one of the companies I teach in, so I just teach one class there, and then they train 4 times a week just themselves, just having open mats where they turn up early to work. And it's like it's a good kind of community for them. So for my own personal, satisfaction, it's suboptimal in terms of coaching and having students and a relationship with them. But for the actual people, I find that it's a good foundation for them to be able to get time in to train. And then from there, if they want to progress forward by joining an academy, which I usually try and propel them to do, is the best bet usually. And then if not, sometimes they train more in the companies. And also in some places as well, I find that people that already train as well, that want to supplement their training, will come to me as well. So.
Yeah, I can second that, and said you did send a good few guys to me that are of excellent quality and fantastic guys training, but also it is good to see when people have even different approaches to training and they can kind of combine the things, whether that's, they could be training mostly in the academy, like, because obviously there's daily sessions there, but then I'd always tell them, no, do go to the classes at work. Even sometimes what happens sometimes is the guys that train in the academy, they will excel in their skill level because they're training on a daily basis. And then if there are people in the companies that don't train as often, obviously then they're not developing as fast, but I always tell them, no, you have to get like still a different approach, different body types, different everything. So the combination of the two, I think, works excellent. And then the fact that you can do it at work, it's just amazing. And I think making probably a lot of people jealous there of your skills around your sales floor. Or
if you're watching this and you want jiu-jitsu in your office, exactbjj.com. And a lot of it as well is like, because these are 1 hour long classes in companies, like the curriculum I try to work off is a 12-month curriculum. So a lot of this is to provide people with the like fundamental technical skills of understanding how the positions work and how they can actually comprehend it, more so than just purely having to figure it out from sparring. So, a lot of what I'm teaching is not necessarily when you go into if you're working in a company and you come to a class that I'm teaching, it's not going to be the case necessarily that we're going to be working, one technique, or it depends on what the group is. But a lot of times what I'm trying to give is a overall insight into how the techniques and the positions work in a more conceptual way. And then obviously we have the sparring to try it out, so that even if you're training full-time in another academy, if you come to the class, you're still going to pick up something that you wouldn't otherwise pick up in an actual academy. And also the class sizes are much smaller, so it's generally like a semi-private type of experience where like me, or if it's another instructor, is able to walk around and help each individual pair while also guiding the class in a direction that's suited to everyone's skill level, and is also oriented around concepts as well as the positions and techniques to, give people an insight into what's going on. Because I find that if you provide people with just a little bit of a spark of an idea, they'll go out and they'll research it themselves, and they'll look online more to try to figure out, okay, what he's talking about when he's talking about, this works from the guard, or this is how these positions work when you're passing, or, here's some ideas for how to submit people, not just merely submissions,
Yeah, I find that jiu-jitsu is largely self-education, right? And I think anybody who is somewhat good is pretty much they're being guided by their coach, by their mentors, but largely, it is self-education. And if you're only turning up to classes to learn something from that class and nothing else, and say, okay, that's all my learning done, and you do no research, no extra practice, no extra thinking about the concepts and the process, then you will literally be limited to that class. So you're basically getting better 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week, whatever it is. Whereas if you're actively thinking about it and researching, that time can be expanded almost infinitely, right?
Yeah, and there's so much information out there now. Like it's crazy. When I first started training, a lot of how, especially competing, a lot of the kind of competition-based techniques or the kind of competitive strategies that myself and then everyone else that I'd be training with and with that are coaching us would have been figured out from maybe like MG in action online, It's like without having the exposure to high level competitors in the country, there wasn't any local resources for being able to pick up these techniques or strategies, whereas there was maybe a little bit on the internet. Especially I found with Dara a lot of the time, he'd make a lot of progress from having MG in action for a base. MG in action probably nobody even looks at it anymore, I'd say, that much, but having a base of a curriculum for techniques to be able to learn from, and then obviously use in tournaments that work at the highest level. Whereas nowadays, every single good competitor has an online resource where you can learn their game and you can have an in-depth explanation of how it works. So I think, especially now, to be able to go online, find out the techniques that you want to learn, and then have an unlimited amount of information that you can continually go back to reference is invaluable, really.
Yeah, for any of the guys newer to Jiu-Jitsu listening to this, MG in Action is Marcelo Garcia's online school, one of the original online resources. Definitely worth checking out. You're all probably sitting now on AOJ and Keenan Online, but MG in Action was the business back in the day. Hopefully still is. Hopefully they're still doing well.
Yeah, I think it's still going. I'm not a member on it, but it seems to still be there, so...
It should be, because again, Marcelo is one of the greatest. So how does current situation affect you with your business, with the coronavirus? Do you provide any online training to your students, or how do you stay in touch? How do you stay connected?
At the moment, I'm closed up. Shop is closed. Unfortunately, I don't have like a dedicated online resource. I do have some online resource, like some techniques and videos and whatnot that I have given to people to be able to reference and work towards. But yeah, with the current situation, it's just close up shop, wait it out, see where things go. Hopefully it won't be too long.
And you're not getting paid, I presume, by the companies then if you're not teaching?
Well, some of them might have on contracts, so it's like there is money in the business, but it's just obviously the cash flow of some of the class I'd have would be like there'd be 2 class I'd have that would be like semi-private training where I'd have people coming month to month, where like obviously I've had to stop that. But like I'm not in too bad of a situation in terms of stability, but it is just a case of having to wait it out. One of the unfortunate things was that I actually had a client pull out on me like 2 weeks ago now, just before all this kicked off. Like I was, so close to closing the deal, and it would have been a big deal as well. They're a big client, and then they were like, with the current situation, we're going to have to postpone this until everything blows over. So it's like, so it is affecting business. But I think, stuff like this is always going to happen. So being prepared for it is mandatory, really, for me to operate. So.
Yeah, and it's also the case of, I think, building somewhat a lean business that you don't have too many overheads that drain you.
Yeah, this is the key. Like, being able to have a good lean business that that you can operate with a certain degree of runway all the time, I think is so important. And it's a lesson that I would have I only picked up maybe in the last few months, but you can see why now as things go, because we might look at a recession now and it's like there could be even more time to, like, for the, obviously right now with the specific situation with the coronavirus, that everything is closed up, but after that there might be a recession then where things start to dry up again. So it's like, to actually hold out is very, very important. Hopefully we'll all be able to do that.
In terms of the innovation, further development in this space, what any ideas around how? Because what I'm looking at here is ways for Jiu-Jitsu competitors or Jiu-Jitsu people, black belts, to make a living by means different to running an academy or organizing a camp or a tournament or something like this. So I think we'll see more and more of this, and a requirement for more innovation in this space, because sooner or later, like Jiu-Jitsu is still young, but sooner or later this market will get saturated with academies, and not even with academies, but sometimes, I think in Dublin, for example, at the moment, it's not the number of academies. I think you could place a lot more academies in Dublin. The problem is real estate. You can't find a place in Dublin that would satisfy the requirements for an academy that would be affordable enough to make it feasible. So what are your ideas around innovation in the space? Where do you think people can venture into to make a living out of jiu-jitsu, but not necessarily through the traditional means?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I think there's a lot of opportunity in the market now, because jiu-jitsu is growing to the point now where, like, you see the people selling like $200 instructionals and whatnot. There's a lot of capital in the market, I think, that people can acquire. It's just finding innovative ways of doing it. The online resources are definitely, they're getting very popular now, but that's definitely a huge mover in the game. I've worked with some of I used to do a little bit of like digital marketing, working on some of those sites, and the kind of numbers they were turning over were like huge for what they'd really done. And obviously they were, first to market in those places. So I think there is definitely scope for innovation in the video resources. This is something that I'm going to try to figure out myself, is to figure out what the optimal price point is for these instructionals with high quality production and editing. Is produced independently, because I know there's a lot of companies that there's like businesses now that are coming up that are producing content on behalf of competitors, and then obviously you leave the marketing, everything into the hands of these companies. But what eventually is happening really is, when that becomes more saturated, it'll just be individual athletes just competing with other athletes within the brand space of one brand. And then down the line, if you want to release more content, you're just going to be competing with yourself, represented by the brand that you had the first deal with for the digital content. So I think there's a lot of space for independently supplied video content. I have some ideas that I want to try to implement, like especially very low price point, like high quality, low price point type videos. I think also the actual business model, nobody's really figured out a good business model yet. Most people seem to go for online subscriptions, kind of like a Netflix style option. But I think there's definitely a lot of potential for just unique individual videos that you can produce independently and then market yourself. It's just kind of like figuring out the margins and how to actually operate a business on that is difficult, because if you allocate a certain proportion of your margins to another company to be able to market and fulfill your orders, as they gather more and more clients, they're going to put in less time to be able to market your specific product, versus you keeping that margin from the start and be able to reinvest it back into actually selling it. The people that I've seen that have made good money have always done that. I think as well, print order merchandise will probably get a bit more traction over the next while. Like, it's an interesting space. I just look at this, like, for e-commerce, an interesting space, like print order gear, things like socks, t-shirts, bags, hats. You can buy them on like Etsy and stuff. I think there's a good niche in the jiu-jitsu market for that, especially for like memes on t-shirts and whatnot. Like, really, I think that's something that'll eventually come into fruition. And obviously, like a print to order business model means that you have no capital outlay initially. You're only paying for what you sell. Essentially, you obviously pay the marketing costs, and then you can hire another company to print the gear for you. Sponsorships and brand deals will eventually get a bit. That market will kind of expand. I think right now the hard thing for these companies when they sponsor athletes is to figure out what the actual return on investment is. But I think that as we go a bit deeper into having more athletes in the market, and then obviously having like different affiliate links and whatnot, companies will get a better idea of what the optimal investment to make in individual people is for their return.
I'm hoping, as part of the series of podcasts, to speak to the players in the market and the likes of the brands, etc. Because what I feel is a lot of people operate and engage with each other based on a lot of assumptions. So athletes assume certain things about the brands assume certain things about the athletes, and there's no so much openness and actually understanding what each of the participant is getting out of this deal. So hopefully we'll explore these avenues. As I said, I don't have answers to those, but hopefully once the certain thoughts are vocalized, people will have actually a better idea about each other's perspectives, and I'm pretty sure there's definitely a scope for a lot better deals.
Yeah, I think there's scope for more management as well. I know before you were looking in with this for like managing athletes for brand deals and whatnot. I think something about people who train is that especially if you're like very good, you spend all your time doing jiu-jitsu. You're not spending your time learning how to negotiate or market or sell yourself. So I think also having, like companies to essentially manage athletes and their deals is something that will occupy the space eventually. Because if you look at these brands, the majority of their exposure is going to come from people wearing their gear in competitions for the most part, especially brands that have really skyrocketed over the past few years. If you look at companies, say for example, that Gordon Ryan represents, they go from 0 to 6-7 figures over the course of a year or two, based upon the exposure from one individual athlete. So I think finding the balance of what the optimal price point in terms of marketing is, a marketing budget for the gi companies and whatnot, and then a place for the athletes to be able to kind of convene together and come up with a reasonable amount of money that they feel would be appropriate for endorsement, is definitely something that can be negotiated further in the future. Like there's definitely a huge amount of scope there for people to be able to come together with that.
Hopefully there will be more development, especially in the times when people have less time to compete and more time to think.
Now's the time to figure it all out.
Exactly. So just before we finish up, also you are teaching seminars once in a while, right? So people can get in touch with you. We'll shortly have you back up on All Jiu-Jitsu as well. So if anybody wants to reach out to Sam for a seminar, we hosted Sam in our academy. So excellent details, which I still use. So I finally got to find out the secrets Sam uses against me all the time to smash me from top. Not that it will stop him smashing me, but at least I know how it's happening. So yeah, if any of you guys want to reach out to Sam for a seminar, do that through All Jiu-Jitsu. Go to his profile, get in touch, book a date, and get it sorted out. Thanks very much, Sam. I really appreciate your input. I think it will be valuable for people listening and thinking of starting something different in the jiu-jitsu space. So I'm pretty sure people also can get in touch with you for advice. I will put all your details in the show notes for the episodes. And yeah, thanks very much, Sam. Appreciate it. Have an awesome day.
Cheers.
And this is it. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. Thank you.